Great, thank you. We're going to continue on with you, Dejan, and start off with a T-ball. Nice little easy question here.
Yeah.
What originally made you go down the route of bootstrapping, and did AirG look to raise capital and decide against it? So why?
Yeah, the company was actually formed in 2000, and it was formed right after the first .com bubble burst. So there was absolutely no way you could raise any capital. So we had to look at opportunities where you could actually start a company with little to no capital. And what actually happened is the mobile internet started in 2000. In Canada, TELUS was one of the first operators to launch mobile internet, I think in September of 2000. And so we actually built some apps that ran on the monochrome browsers at 14.4 kilobits per second. And we actually generated revenues by data sharing with TELUS. So we actually were getting paid per minute when people used our products. So that actually started the company, and then carriers around the world started launching mobile web, and that in turn made it so we absolutely didn't have to bootstrap at all. So we bootstrapped the whole time. We didn't have to raise any capital at all.
That's great. Continue on to Ayden. Bootstrapping a company can be both an exciting and a scary experience. So I know you put a good deal of your savings into launching Digitalchemy. What were the biggest obstacles that you had to overcome in your first 6 to 12 months starting this company?
Well, I guess the first was convincing my wife that putting my 401k into this was a really good idea. So I think that probably the first obstacle was, I worked at a big company, and it's really hard to go from, fatty salary to not salary at all. And sort of, even now, I recently had to refile some taxes from them, and I was going through old expenses, and I'm like, don't go to the restaurant. You don't need to do that. So downscaling your kind of lifestyle a bit to self-fund something was super challenging. The other thing I'd say was really challenging there was just focus. Like saying, we started out making this shopping app, and it was awesome. It had every feature you can imagine. It got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. After 8 months, we hadn't shipped it, and we just cut it and said, let's do something that takes a month. So kind of learning that lesson of, look, you're not going to build the next Facebook with all of its features in one go. Start with something small and pick some target that you can win at.
Trial and error.
Exactly.
Well, great. And here's a bit of a selfish question for myself, and I'm sure most people in the room have a bit of an entrepreneurial bone in their body, but probably haven't taken the dive that the four of you have taken into starting their own company. This one's for Ben first. What's the biggest advice you could give to somebody who's looking to bootstrap and start a company based on the experiences that you've had?
I mean, my biggest advice is go after passion, not money. This is not easy, and it's not quick either. So you want to make sure you love what you're doing, and it may never make money, and statistically it probably will fail. So you should have fun, along the way.
Awesome. Same question to you, Andrea.
Again, probably passion is one of the most important things, and the other thing is to keep it simple. So one of the things that I learned in these years was when I started with my first app was really simple, and it went well. It was so simple that then I kind of felt guilty because I was like, I don't deserve this. It's like, I should probably put some more effort and build something more meaningful. And I did it with assumption that user would love it anyway, regardless. And I spent like literally months with my business partner to build these other apps, and then they turned out not to be that successful. It's really important to start small, try, understand what works, what doesn't, and eventually keep improving on something that is working, but not because of your assumption, but because you got data and analytics to actually support your decisions. So start small, iterate, and keep growing.
Awesome. And speaking of, and continuing with you, Andrea, speaking of something working, I'm sure most of you don't even realize it, but you more than likely might have Andrea's app on your phone as we speak. iTorch Flashlight has been one of the top downloaded applications across both app stores.
Yeah.
And so, while a lot of companies have that VC capital to put into, grabbing more users, how did you find that growing your user base How did you do that without having that backing to go and spend money with the likes of Millennial and other ad networks?
I really believe in timing.
Yep.
Christian this morning said a very true thing, which is timing is equal luck, and it's true. I feel like when I released the app was 2010, and it was basically when Apple released the iPhone 4. It was the first phone to have a flash on the back. And the timing of the release of the iPhone was a little bit weird. Like they released it first here in the US, and then there was like a huge gap between they made it available in Europe. So at the same time, I was learning iPhone development, and I heard this story of this guy here in the US that released a flashlight app and made this crazy amount of money in 1 week, 1 month. And back then I realized that pretty much all the developers were like from English-speaking countries. And I was Italian, I was like, maybe I can do something, I can replicate the same thing and localize basically the app for other countries. And so I did, and by just choosing the right name at the right time and releasing the app at the right moment, it went like viral, and it worked out very, very well. And yeah.
Yeah, great, awesome. Dejan, going back to you, and you having one of the oldest companies on the panel, 14 years in the game. I mean, you guys were around before there were even smartphones. So, what was your business then, and have you been forced to evolve as the ecosystem has changed so rapidly over the last 10 to 15 years?
Right. So our business back then was again about timing. We basically found an opportunity where mobile operators were investing in infrastructure to offer mobile internet on the phone and on feature phones and on monochrome screens. So they needed content for it, and they're all creating their own portals. So we essentially created some games. We had one of the first massively multiplayer social games called Atomic Dove, and we launched it on these operators. And again, the business model back then was revenue share on data. So for us, it was all about getting people to use it daily and actually eat some kilobits or some minutes of time, and then we would actually share in that data. So that was really the start of it. And then over time, with color devices coming out, color feature phones coming out, we kind of added some graphics and some more data to it. And we've probably pivoted like 2 or 3 times within the period. We've always just been hungry and kind of found opportunities and always have increased our revenues month over month. So a big focus for us was, are we making money and do we have cash in the bank? And so that's really what drove our business.
Great. Over to Ayden, speaking of money, how do you scale expectations versus realities when you don't have the capital that a VC-backed company might have?
Interesting, I was saying to Dejan just before we came up, I was like, everyone that I know who's venture funded that I talk to talks about user acquisition.
Yep.
And we don't. We all talk about profitability because it's all about saying, hey, how do we survive next month? The thing that I'm struck here listening to everyone talk about is they talk about timing.
Yep.
And I think for a bootstrap startup, timing is about still being in business when the opportunity comes. Yeah. So it's all about saying, hey, yeah, it's timing, but it's also about saying, look, how low can you go in terms of costs? The thing that we do at Digitalchemy a lot is that, we decide, okay, we're going to do this thing. We'll figure out, actually write out, this is how much we think it'll take, this much of a developer's time, this much of this much of that. We look at it and we'll go, okay, what if we only spent half of that? And you go, and you're like, oh no, and you go through it and you're like, what falls out? And then you come up with, okay, that's still kind of okay. And then we're like, okay, divide that by 5. Now figure out what falls out. By the time you're done, it is amazing how many times you start off saying we need $1 million, and you end up going, for 50K, we can do like most of it, and yeah, it'll be a little shabby for a little bit, and if people like it, we'll make it better. So I think you change your mindset a lot about saying, what can we do with what we have?
Exactly. That's great. Great advice. So Ben, PureBang is in a different shoe than most of the people on the panel, where you did look to raise capital in the initial stages, but moved away from that. Tell us about that experience and why you chose to move away from that.
So we did. We actually raised $200,000 from angels here in Baltimore and DC. That was the first 9 months we were in business, and we were trying to do that in parallel with also making our first game.
Yep.
After we finished the raise, we looked back and we're like, well, all the time we spent pitching, if we would have spent that 9 months, and because we were unpaid that entire time, and it was like, if we would have just spent that time making the game instead, we would have actually had a better game, and some of these other companies that kind of got ahead of us because they started with VC funding or whatever,
Right.
We actually would have been able to catch up to them because we weren't worried about our salaries at the time. So we just decided, like, well, what are other strategies that we can do that won't take so much time and will allow us to achieve our goals, which
Yep.
Grow the team, stay in business, month to month, and so we switched over to bootstrapping.
That being said, any future plans to possibly go back down that route of raising venture capital?
So I don't think so. I'll never say no. I don't think if we did a raise, it would be more for growth, not for sustainability. I believe and I'm sure the other guys on the panel believe, like, you just have to make a sustainable company and be able to generate your own revenue, and then if you need a little bit to get over the hump, sure. But for us, I could see taking money for a specific project, but not for the company.
Yep, great.
At this point.
Thank you. So, I think amongst, everyone in the industry, it's a common belief that not being in San Francisco or New York or one of the tech hotbeds makes it that much more difficult to raise venture capitalist money. Do you believe that to be true? None of you are really located in any of those major markets. To Dejan, do you think your location had any ability, in not being able to raise capital?
Well, when we started, there was no capital available, but
Right.
since when we started actually growing, we had traction. Every VC started calling us. We've probably any smart VC is going to travel to you. You don't have to travel to them.
Yep.
So if smart VCs will hunt you out, and there's and they'll visit you. So we've had options of money, but we've never really figured out what we'd do with the money. So we couldn't really accelerate our business if we took money in, and so we just would, it wouldn't benefit stakeholders.
Yep.
And so essentially what's happened is that we put money into the bank, and now we act as our own VC. So we fund our own projects, we fund our own ideas.
Yep.
And hopefully one will be a hit one day.
That's great. Aidan, same question to you with being in Seattle.
Sure. I think Seattle, Seattle's definitely improving in terms of its venture base. I spent a lot of time in San Francisco, and I have to say, like, if we'd started up there, the culture, I think, is such that, like, everyone I meet there is like, oh, I know a venture guy you should talk to, like,
Yep.
and the culture there is such that we probably would have gotten connected with a VC.
Would you have moved forward with that if it was an opportunity?
I kind of think if we'd gotten $1 million in our first year, we would have spent $1 million in our first year.
Yeah.
Not
Not going to say no to it.
So I think not. I think we're really happy with what we've done. There's only so many calculators we can make before people start just looking at us funny. So I think we're good.
Great. Kind of moving on with that, Ben, I think myself and a lot of people in this room hold Baltimore very close to our hearts. Millennial obviously came through an incubator and grew into what we are here today. With yourself being in Baltimore and being a Baltimore-based company and a leader, do you ever put any thought, was there any thought into moving out of Baltimore when PureBank first came around, knowing that Baltimore doesn't necessarily have that backing as a tech hub?
So actually, I always wanted to start the company in Baltimore, and I had some potential partners that were going to start with me, and I was trying to make the case for Baltimore, and they were making the case for other areas. So I actually just went around and collected data and did research on, like, every city out there. Some had tax credits and other incentives, but tax credits don't matter if you have no revenue. So that wasn't really helpful in the beginning. And at the end of the day, it just came to, like, I'm in Baltimore. I know the ecosystem here. I know the players here. Yep. And Baltimore actually has some really nice pros. Like, we are, as far as, like, universities, the largest concentration of universities in the U.S.
Yep.
are right here. So for getting young talent, this is actually one of the best cities you can be in. Cost of living is reasonable as well. So, if we went to San Francisco, we would just disappear.
Yeah.
But here, like, we can actually make a difference and be impactful, not just, in our lives, but, the surrounding community as well.
Yep. Now, as a Baltimore resident, it's great to see, and obviously any growth in technology anywhere is great, but here in Baltimore, it's even more special. So Ayden, time to put a smile on everyone's face. You have a very heartwarming story of how your calculator apps came to be, and I did a little background on your daughter, kind of coming up with the idea. Can you give us a little bit of background on how that came to be?
Sure. So my daughter, Belle, was 11 years old. So when we started, we tried out different apps. We tried a shopping app. We made a kind of email management app. We're doing these different apps. And my daughter was very much about, my dad makes apps. And that was kind of cool.
Yep.
So I was helping her with her math homework. She was 11. And it was fractions. And, she did her thing. And I was trying to figure out, is that answer right or not? And I'm like this. 3/4 times 7/8. Can't quite do it in my head. And she looked at me and she was like, it'd be great if there was an app where you could just type it in like you think about it. 3/4 times 7/8. And I was like, let's look. I gotta go.
And that's the story.
That's basically the story. So I talked with Micah, who was my partner in the business, and we were like, let's do it. So we made this fraction calculator. It's been downloaded like more than 2 million times.
Yep.
It is the #1 fraction app in the world.
I have it. It's
and
great.
she's a very proud girl.
Yeah, I would imagine. That's fantastic. So I have about 2 questions left. We also only have about 5 minutes left, so I just wanted to open it up to any questions from the audience for anyone here.
Hey, so I'm not sure which background. I know Andrea is a developer, but for the other people, if any of you are not developers, I'm curious how you guys found your CTO, your tech partner, what you look for, what that search.
For me, I worked at a tech company. I was a program manager at the time, but I had been a developer in the past, and so I'd worked with other developers. So just met him at work.
So I'm a producer, or which is another word for project manager / designer. It's a hybrid title in games. Yeah, it was actually a challenge. Going in, I had some people that were going to be my partners, and then when it came time to leave our salary jobs, they chickened out. So I just went ahead and did it myself. And it's a challenge to find developers that you can work with and trust because it is your lifeblood, and luckily, like I said, here in Baltimore, there's actually a really good kind of upcoming young talent pool. So I was able to put together a pretty good team of passionate developers to give forth.
In my case, I'm more of the business guy, so I met some people that were the technical side. And then we just hired a big team, and they are no longer technical anymore. So we're all just kind of, the founders all are more kind of business people than tech at all, but we just hired a really good tech team in Vancouver, which was easy back then, a little harder now.
Any other questions around the room?
If you were to start a new app today with no funding, how would you go about getting known and getting downloads on the store?
It's the $1 million question.
I guess I can talk a little bit to that. Our very first success was on the Nook App Store, believe it or not. It's the first place we made any money at all. We were like, yes. And we weren't there by accident. We went there because we were tiny, we had no money, and there wasn't a lot of competition. And so if I were starting out today, I might be looking at, pick something you can actually, don't bite off more than you can chew. If you're going to make a social networking app, no one's ever going to find you. Not without VC funding. But if you decide to make not a calculator, but but if you decide to make an app that's focused on fractions or that's focused on racing cars or something like that, you can find search terms or little niches where you go look at the competition for that and go, I could stand out in that field. That I think is how I would choose it, because if people can't find your app, they can't download it. So I would look for where can I actually stand out? What app stores, what categories, what search terms?
Yeah, I think you just have to kind of look at data, like what's come before. Sometimes we look at old platforms and see if there's something popular that nobody's transitioned over yet. you could look at, like what Andrea was saying, he looked at, in the US there was a popular flashlight app, so he made a flashlight app for outside the US, and that's just really smart. So.
Anybody else? Okay, I got one closing question. I think we have about 2 minutes, so we should be able to fly through this, but it's the crystal ball time. So if you could go back to the beginning of when you guys started your companies and do anything differently, what would that be and why? We'll start with Ayden.
Don't go to the restaurants. You don't have to. Christian said something earlier that resonated for me. Hire a good lawyer, yes. Hire a good accountant. There's nothing like the pain of refiling your 2010 taxes because you filed your single member LLC as a sole trader instead of a partner. Anyhow, so I think on taxes, make sure your taxes are taken care of by somebody who knows what they're doing and not someone who's a developer pretending to be a tax guy.
Great. Ben?
I would have kept it much simpler. And I heard somebody else with a similar story. We had this, I think actually it might have been you, we had this great idea for a game, and we just kept adding more and more features to it because it was just like so awesome and people love it. And at the end of the day, like we just spent too long on that. And after that, the next app we went to, we were just like, what can we make in a month? And now we've gotten back up to 4 months, 6 months is our dev times, but like we never want to go, bigger than that now.
Yeah. Dejan?
I think it's all about focus. We had, over the years, we've had hundreds of opportunities come across our doors, and then we dabble into one, and then we realize we just wasted like a year of development on something that wasn't going to work because somebody said that it's going to work. So really, it's like make sure you focus on your products that are going to bring in the money for you, and the sky is always like bluer somewhere else. Like look at your own field first and make sure you kind of garden your own field first because there's tons of opportunities, but they may not be right for you. So just focus.
And Andrea, I think we have time just for you.
So if you are a developer, especially at the beginning, if you're an indie developer, you might be tempted to do everything yourself. And that's something that is gonna kill you. So what I would change is probably I would look for partners a lot sooner than than I did, and I would probably back up what Christian said this morning. Look for someone smarter than you, because it's really important to have someone actually to to have a conversation with, come up with ideas, and think about new opportunities and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Awesome, great. Well, everyone, thank you for being up here. Thank you for telling us your stories. We really appreciate it. Learning more about our most trusted developers who have come from the bootstrapping world was great for me, and I hope it was for everybody else.